Well, a host of CEOs have stepped down lately, including Nick Badminton, former CEO of Pick n Pay, and David Brown, CEO of Impala Platinum. Joining us in studio to discuss some of the challenges with regards to leadership is David Leigh, CEO of SHL, and Reuel Khoza, CEO at the Institute of Directors of South Africa. A very warm welcome to you.
Hi.
Well, let's just kick off the conversation and just start with where we're at in South Africa. We appear to be doing a little bit better than the other BRICS countries. Just tell us what it is that is giving us that competitive advantage when it comes to comparing to those other countries.
So we at SHL assess 25 million people a year all around the world, in every industry, in every country, and we've compared talent in various different places to look for leadership potential. And what we found is that here in South Africa, 1 in 17 of your graduates and your middle managers really have the potential to do more and to be leaders in their organizations. And that compares with the BRIC countries that are faring a little bit less well than you guys, at 1 in 19. And I think you should be very happy about that here in South Africa, because I guess there are also countries which are vying for as much foreign direct investment as possible.
But you do say that we are behind, though, if you were to look at G8 countries.
Behind the G8. So the G8 are at 1 in 10, and you guys here in South Africa are 1 in 17. And I think that there's some sense here of a much more developing economy, as opposed to the economies like the States and Japan and the UK, maybe much more developed, had talent management practices for that much longer, which are enabling for leadership potential to be generated earlier and earlier, and therefore people given the chance to progress their careers.
Well, comparatively, I mean, we seem to be doing than our BRIC, fellow BRIC counterparts. 1 in 17 have what it takes to become a leader. That's a startling figure. So, what's actually going wrong here? Because this brings into the spotlight the entire supply-demand dynamic that's out there.
I don't actually think, Alishia, anything's going wrong. We operate in 116 countries around the world, and South Africa is our 4th biggest market. Mm-hmm. You guys really appreciate the importance of measuring and therefore being able to manage talent. But I think what we have to appreciate is leadership is difficult. I mean, to my mind, leadership is enabling an organization to create positive change. And the key word there for me is enabling. So leadership is about appreciating that you are dispensable. Dictatorship is about believing that you are indispensable. And so what are the ways in which you create a situation in which you are indispensable? It's about setting a direction, it's about empowering people, and it's, for me, most importantly, about sharing risk. And those are difficult things to find in a single human being. And so I think that actually South Africa is doing an awful lot to find leaders of the future. You
were talking about talent management, and I want to come back to what you say when it comes to the difference between the G8 countries and us, and you were talking about potential. What makes it different? What is causing South Africa to lag behind the G8 countries, for instance? Could it be education? What is it that makes that potential different?
There are a number of things which would put someone high on the grid of potential to be a leader. I think the 3 that are most important are the ability to adapt, particularly in business environments which are changing constantly. Secondly, a situation in which someone can understand how to convert ideas to action. Loads of people have really great ideas, few people able to take those ideas and really make change happen as a result. And then thirdly, those individuals who can really take people with them. And what we found in our research is that South Africa still has some development needs in terms of people coping with change and taking people with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a function of being a more developing economy than some of the developed economies around the world.
Well, joining our conversation now, Reuel Khoza, CEO at the Institute of Directors South Africa. Reuel, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Let's bring you into the conversation at this point and get your assessment of the leadership potential South Africa boasts right now and the kind of playing field that leaders out there are operating in.
Thank you very much. First, a little correction. I'm not CEO anywhere. I'm too old to be that. I'm actually president of the Institute of Directors. I don't work there full time. I'm just a titular head. Your question is about the kinds of leaders that South Africa might be boasting of currently. A lot depends on whether you're looking at generic leadership out there, as in, say, political leadership or leadership in civic affairs, leadership in business, or leadership in politics. In politics, I think we do boast a good number of leaders in our cabinet. One such sterling leadership has just been demonstrated by our Minister of Finance, and what team he leads and how he goes about leading that team. And I believe you can generalize to a few other cabinet members in there. In business, a good number of corporations actually have demonstrated amply that we can hold our own virtually anywhere in the world. If you look at financial services, whether it's life companies or banks, we're holding ourselves pretty commendably. In fact, even during the global meltdown, the recent global meltdown, many banks in the world, particularly in the US, went belly up, and we held our own. We did not have to be rescued at all. Mm-hmm. That, I believe, attests to the caliber of leadership that we have in the country.
Having said that, there's no denying that there's a demand that's out there, and that's exactly what's fueling, the kind of wars we're seeing for talent that's out there on an executive level. So how do you factor in the demand scenario? Because we were talking earlier about there being 1 in 17 people in South Africa having got what it takes to become a leader.
The paucity of leadership is something that we cannot deny at all. Over the years, we have not been deliberate and purposeful in developing leadership talent. In recent times, there have been all manner of initiatives, whether you're talking about the one initiated by University of Pretoria under the auspices or under the name of Bishop Tutu, or a number of African leadership initiatives, some initiated by the likes of ourselves at the NEPAD Business Foundation, where we run leadership development courses with GIBS currently, and earlier on we ran those with vets. But even that, I think, is a far cry to what is in fact really needed. My sense is that the best way we could actually tackle that, given that we'll be dealing with complexity as this particular decade unfolds, would be to introduce way above and beyond management development courses at the universities and business schools to flood those institutions of higher learning, perhaps even as early as high school, with tuition and catalytic processes in developing leadership.
David, I want to bring you in here when it comes to what SHL has found in South Africa. It seems as though when it comes to leadership, we're doing well in industrial metals and mining. We seem to be doing well in the oil and gas sector. And we're on average when it comes to sectors like telecoms, healthcare, customer services, retail. But where we are finding a challenge, or where SHL has found a challenge in South Africa, is in those sectors where it's industrial construction, industrial engineering. We seem to be having problems there. Where are the disparities coming from, and how can we fix that shortfall? Well,
how can you fix it? I mean, I think we should appreciate the leadership landscape is a global landscape, and there's a lot of mobility going around in the world at the moment, and I'd like to see South Africa be a net importer of the best global talent from around the world, not as a substitute.
In the meantime, do we stand as a net exporter?
Well, I mean, I live in London, and at the moment we have Glencore and Xstrata trying to create one of the largest companies on the London Stock Exchange, both run by South African CEOs.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd like to see a situation in which more people are coming in, not to substitute for native South African talent, but to actually help cultivate and grow more and more leaders here in South Africa than you're actually losing.
Why are we exporting more right now?
Do you know, I'm sure Reuel will have more of a sense. I don't know. This is a wonderful country. I unfortunately only come here twice a year. This is a great environment to be a leader, because you're a gateway to the rest of the African continent.
So where do some of the challenges lie, Reuel? I mean, because we've been talking about the mobility of leaders we've seen just this year alone, and one of the, the players that stands front and foremost is Nick Badminton, CEO of Pick n Pay. We've had David Brown, CEO of Impala as well. Both of them, the recent few to have announced they're stepping down as CEOs.
I guess the challenge is pervasive. It's very, very widespread, and we have tended to tackle it as if it was a narrow challenge. I believe we have to accept also that we live in a neighborhood. The global environment attracts people, and people are now very, very mobile. It is actually quite painful to observe the number of chartered accountants and specialists in medicine that actually leave the country and go offshore And unfortunately, you can't stem that tide because the world is a neighborhood, and if the attraction is such that it's irresistible out there.
What we can do, though, is become a little bit more competitive. So how do we?
Certainly. But I think in the corporate environment, we have become fairly competitive. But given that there are economies that can afford to pay more, people will move. But what is edifying is that a good number of some of the chartered accountants that left these shows are coming back. So just as we were saying earlier on, in fact, we have to be magnanimous, we have to mature about how we look at tackling the challenge. And as you correctly point out, we have to make sure that the environment here is conducive for people to stay once they have qualified.
I want to talk a little bit about the remuneration. It seemed as though that one of the things that your organization had published, well, they had been interviewed last month, and one of the things that was supposed to come into effect here in February was the Code for Responsible Investing in South Africa, and it did touch on that remuneration. And one of the things that we have seen in South Africa, and it's not just here in South Africa, I think you would attest to this, it seems to be a global phenomenon when it comes to people saying, well, you're paying executives too much, CEOs are getting too much, and this was supposed to address one of that as an issue here in South Africa. When it comes to that remuneration, though, it seems as though we do have this leadership demand all over the world. When it comes to that argument, how do we settle that here in South Africa, considering that we do have these issues where you've got people that are saying that we are not getting enough, and yet you've got people who are at the high end who are getting so much. And we had this interview in our last panel where somebody was saying that has to be changed. Can we change it, considering that people do want our leaders around the world?
I don't know if you'd like to take a step back to that first.
I think it's about being really, really key to saying what's good performance for a CEO, because where there is good performance, then good remuneration should follow. And one thing, to my point earlier, if leadership is about creating a dispensable position, then a CEO who doesn't have a good succession plan, who doesn't understand how the organization is going to change after he or she leaves, isn't doing a good job, and as a result, shouldn't have a big differential between her pay and the median in the business.
Yep. Is succession planning happening enough as it should, or to the extent that it should be happening in South Africa, Reuel?
It is happening in a number of organizations, but perhaps let me start with the Gini coefficient, a measure on which South Africa actually is stacking up very, very poorly. There's too wide a difference, too wide a gap between the lowliest paid and the most highly paid. It is almost obscene. Ratios of 1 to 400 for every 1 rand given to the most lowly paid person to 400 of the most highly paid, and you multiply that multifold, the gap is just yawning. So there is a sense in which one has got to acknowledge that as a leader, you are a coordinator, but you're also a catalyst. So your impact is widespread. Your absence could actually bring the value or the net asset value of a company phenomenally down. If you walk in front of the so-called proverbial bus, the company just suffers, which actually attests to the impact that you actually have. We have to recognize that. But I think you can actually stretch that to an obscene level, which is why regulation has got to come into the picture. And where regulated industries are concerned, like banks, for instance, these actually get, if you like, intervened into by regulatory forces that actually make sure that you don't wind up a victim of that aberration.
Well, gentlemen, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there for this afternoon. Thanks so much for your insights today. Of course, that David Leigh, CEO of SHL, and Reuel Khoza, President at the Institute of Directors, South Africa.